All right, it says we're going. Hello, humans. Hello, humans. It's Saturday, the 14th of August, 2021, year woo. And we're at the point of the overwoo, which we can describe as reaching the woo d'état. Now, we need to understand French for a minute. So, actually, it's not even really French so much. The issue is the way languages evolve. So, all of the Romance languages, all of the languages centered around Rome, Italian, French, Romanian even, have certain characteristics, or within one group. And the Teutonic languages in Europe, the German, Dutch, Belgian, Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish, and English have another center. English is a little bit different because we've taken up to 60% of our nouns from the Romance languages. And so we use words like if you say coup d'etat. So the woo d'état is based on the phrase coup d'état. And so coup d'état is French, and coup means blow, like I'm going to hit you, right? Like strike. So strike. The phrase means blow against the state. The state. And if you notice, d'état is actually a compound contraction in French. So in French, there's this so D with the encritic. This here means from or of or to. It's preposition. It should be written as de. But they don't want to double up. They've got this other E here. And then the accent, T-A-T. Now this structure right here is actually referencing an old form of spelling. And this little mark up above the E, when it is ahead of a T or a P, means there used to be an S there. So this word used to be E-S-T-A-T. Sort of, very much like state, right? Estat, estate. So this was a blow against the state. And let me get rid of that right there. Anyway, so our blow against the state is not the woo against the state, right? The woo d'état is an entirely different thing. So the blow against the state, the coup d'état, is usually defined as actually, it's really odd, but there are officialdom definitions and rules for things like a coup. So if it only lasts 6 days, it's not officially a coup. Did you know that? It's got to hold for at least 7 days to officially be a coup. There's various different types of coups. They have coups that are basically Praetorian Guard kind of things, where the security apparatus takes over the state, or various different kinds of other things based on who is attempting to take over the apparatus of the state. And the whole thing is basically the blow against the state is a decapitation move, all right? Kappa, kaput in German, meaning you're kaput, but it all comes down to head, right? Decapitate, incapacitated, all of these relate to the Latin root for head, caputa. And so we have most coups are blows against the head of the state, the head of the apparatus. And so you see that coups are usually defined as some kind of a lightning strike or a quick action. and they come on in, and it could be a band of rebels, or as I say, it could be the security apparatus, and it comes in and swoops up everybody and it's all done. Then they hold for 7 days and they're officially a coup. If they hold on for years and years and years, they become the officialdom, just by lasting long enough. And that's basically the way that power politics works. And everybody who is the head of state always worries about the coup de state, right? And in this case, we're going to be rapidly approaching a coup de state. Now, there's a very big difference here, because in the coup d'etat, you want to get the head. You want to get the head of the state, and you want to decapitate it from the rest of the state. And that's the idea, that you don't attack the state per se. This is not a war where you're attacking the state, which is the state is the assembled apparatus of the people and the military and the government. In this case, you're just going after what you think of as the head of the state attempting to seize control. And the coup part, the blow, is what causes this to occur. Now, in our particular situation, we're coming into the coup d'etat. And in this case, the state, in the old sense, the head of the state, the organizing body of the state, is going to be not struck by a blow, but subsumed in the coup. And so this is that part of the overwoo that we could describe as the beginning of the crescendo. All right, so this is a weird kind of a music, if you put in a music analogy to it, it's a very weird kind of a thing, because we're going to have a crescendo that just takes a long time to complete, and then it's going to trail off for years and years and years. But we are actually in a crescendo. We're not at the peak of it. That can really only be determined looking backwards. But we're very close to that peak. We're not quite close to looking backwards, so we'll have to wait until 2022 to look back and say, okay, the peak occurred, we think, in this particular week, right? In this week, the Wu overcame 100%. We could see that, basically the state was 100% subsumed, and all aspects of the state thereafter were having to deal with Wu as opposed to their own agenda. And so at the point of the overwoo, the crescendo of the overwoo, the wave coming over the wave of suppressed information and oppressed belief systems and hidden knowledge and all of that, when it overtakes the state, thereafter the state is doing nothing but fighting retreating actions and trying to deal with the crises of the moment, and is not able to plan for nor execute plans in any long-range, agenda-driven kind of an approach. And so the coup d'etat is that point in the crescendo process, which is its own curve within this larger curve. And so the coup d'etat would be defined as something like in this. Now, in our particular point right here, we're looking at 14, and so I thought that we would reach a maximum a couple of weeks back when I ran the building tension and release tension value routines. I thought we're going to reach it sometime around the 16th or so, and I believe that we'll be way into it here on the 16th, that we'll actually be floating on the Wu at that point, and that this period right here, let's just say that it's going to take up until October 1. So we're basically looking at month and a half, right? 6 weeks or so. And we're at the point now where the state, as we're going to define it by the controlling apparatus, is now going to have to be, okay, so let me reverse that. Let me put it another way. In a coup d'etat, the goal is to isolate and capture the head the body politic, thinking that thereafter the body will follow along. In the process of the wooing, which is a natural occurrence, it's not directed in any of that. There are directed activities within the woo, but they're not directing the overwooing. But within the overwooing, we actually have a separation of the state from the head as the state decides to move forward, and the head is simply not able to cope. Now, bear in mind that government, all politicians are not leaders, okay? Leaders are only needed during times of war. We're in a time of war now, so we need leaders. And so this is another reason that it will become very apparent that we're in this overwoo, because all politicians always are followers. They always follow the trends. They never create trends, try and go their own way, any of this sort of thing. See, there's the thing. If you're a true leader, you don't care if people are following you or not. You're going to go, right? There's people on top of a hill shooting at you, and it's like, you know, fuck that. I'm going to go up there and stop them from doing that. And you don't care if other people are behind you, because you shall accomplish that. That's a leader. Now, you may get killed along the way, but that's neither here nor there, right? But you are indeed self-actualizing and self-directing and going. And that's how we define leaders. Now, there's other qualities that go to leadership, like smarts and not getting other people killed and all of these sorts of things, right? Those are practice leaders, not natural leaders just arising on the moment. But we are at a point now where we're in a war. It's an information war at this stage. And you're going to see that the head of our state, Biden's regime, they're not leaders, that they're barely competent enough to be poor followers, and that everything's breaking down around them to the point where the entire state, that is to say the body politic, all of us guys that, you know, put the little check marks on the vote and pay our taxes and all of that kind of shit, right? Drive on the appropriate side of the road. So the estate of beings that constitutes the state of the world, because we're not talking about just the United States. This is not nationalistic here. The overwoo does not give a shit about national borders. And the overwoo is planet-wide. It is not ubiquitous around the planet in intensity. So it may be more intense in Brazil and not as intense in Japan, right, at any given particular moment. But the overwoo is everywhere, because the entire global power structure is breaking down. And we are at a woo d'etat, where the populace is separating itself from the head of the state. Not just Biden, I'm defining that for the United States, but the entire power structure that Biden is the face of here in the USA. In other places, it would be Merkel, it would be Boris Johnson. Just pick the leader as the face of the state, of the head of the state in your area. And we're all separating from them. We're leaving the COVID bullshit behind. Everybody's pushing back on every damn thing. We're not accepting anything from any of the language that they're putting out. And this is becoming ever so more apparent as the mainstream media keeps trying to plug the diminishing actual output from the head of state as the rest of us move on, basically saying we don't give a shit. We've got things to do because we're in a major crisis, right? And so over this period of time here, we're going to have more crises. And we're going to get to the point where they're here in the USA. So we're just talking the USA at the moment. So the USA is going to have a constitutional crisis. Now, it's already in one sense, and that is that we've been, that the head of state has been captured by the CCP by way of infiltration. So we have a constitutional crisis at that level, and that is in fact breaking out now, and that's part of the woo. That's part of the woo d'etat. The fact that the body of the state now sees the CCP sitting up there with the head of its state here in the USA. And that's also that this duality thing is going to start expressing itself in other countries around the world as the other countries look to us, see what's going on, and then examine their own situation. They already are. And they see the CCP there as well. And so now we see that it's actually the CCP and our global elites as the head of the global state. And WU doesn't care about national borders. It's global. So the over-WU is global, and you'll find that the over-WU is happening in all languages, and it's all kinds of information, all coming out about how corrupt the CCP slash elite slash head of state in any given particular area is. Now, in our area here in the United States, between now, 14th, and October 1, we're going to have a constitutional crisis. Many of them, in fact, probably, all blending into one large constitutional crisis that will take us some time into this point. Blended into that constitutional crisis will be the gradual acceptance of the idea that a state of war exists between the state and the CCP. And in this case, we're talking specifically a nation state, which is the USA, because we're going to have to be nationalists, all right? We're going to have to concentrate on our own nation to clean our own house. And one of the things that we're going to do is to decide that the USA state is indeed at war with the sneaky attack of the CCP, and that the sneaky attack is at 3 or 4 or 5 different levels. We're going to find many different levels. In fact, we're going to find that they've attacked our crops. And we'll see specifically that the potato crop and corn and peas are being assaulted by a bioweapon, which is it's going to be a pea rust or something. I don't know how we'll name it, a pea fungus or something, but it's also affecting corn and potatoes. We'll just say it's a fungus. And it came over from the CCP. And we'll find evidence of that as we go forward. A lot of these things are predictions based on the language from the old reports, okay? But a lot of it is also in terms of the timing and stuff based on the rising and falling tension values within the language we see every day now. So within our constitutional crisis, we're going to see that the USA was attacked, and so we're going to start as a populace. We're going to start doing those things that the populace always does when it starts to realize we're at war. So now bear in mind that it was a sharp, deadly attack in Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, 1941. But that sharp, deadly attack took months. It took weeks to cross the United States to where everyone knew. There were a lot of people that knew that day. There was radio and so on, but there were also a lot of people that were not in the electrification process. They didn't have access to this sort of instant information. Newspapers were a 2 and 3 day process to get them off of trains. People knew about it, but they had no details. They didn't know what had happened in any detail at all, and it took a while before there was actually a state level, a populace level understanding. Now, we were at war in a very short period of time, and the populace got going and so on. So I expect that kind of stuff to happen again. It happened in World War I. In World War I, it took like, I think, okay, so that was from April of 1917 until June, I think, May or June of 1918. In May or June of 1918, we got into the swing of things, and we were inducting 10,000 men a day into, or maybe it was a week, 10,000, it was 10,000 men a day, I think, into the armed services, right? And in World War II, the rapidity was not that fast, but it was because we had a huge level of technology that we had to create. And so, but within months of the attack, because it wasn't planned and, you know, Roosevelt knew it was going to happen and all this kind of stuff. We had a czar for industry. We had major changes in the social order. Women were being mobilized as a workforce. There was a refined propaganda arm put into place. We call it advertising. They started advertising, and the social structure was being reorganized extremely rapidly and cooperatively. That is to say that the social order cooperated with it. Now, we have the current CCP takeover in all states, in all nations, trying to reorganize the state along the CCP lines. But this is not cooperative, you'll notice. And this is why they're running into trouble, because we're pushing back. We don't want this sort of thing. It's very particularly acute here in the United States because they cannot overwhelm us, because there's too many citizens that are too heavily armed for even our own military to think about doing anything. And our own military is also part and parcel of the whole constitutional crisis that's involved here. So the powers that be have a very delicate path forward, and that very delicate path forward through the Wu is shrinking and degrading on them and under their feet as they go forward, but they must go forward because they can't go back. They can't withdraw to the point of any kind of relative safety that they used to enjoy several years ago before this attack was launched. It's a do or die kind of a thing. And for them, it's a do and die, because they did attack us, and many of them will pay the price. The Wu d'etat is this process here where you will see an active level of froth in the information war as the battles become intensified. So I don't know what the social media is that you might consume, but in that social media, you'll be able to see the head of the state desperately battling the Wu, which is all this hidden stuff that keeps coming out. Everything that they've oppressed, everything that's been hidden all these years, and it's just going to be attacking them from all these different angles, all these weird things showing up, many of which they will be forced to not comment on, to just simply let go and build on their own until they come to a certain mass. One of these is like the discovery of the CDC documents here in the United States. The CDC is planning on concentration camps. They call them humanitarian facilities or something like that, but it's anti-vax concentration camps. Bear in mind now, the goal of the CCP is to use their only tool, divide and conquer. That's how they work, right? They divide the populace in order to get it into small chunks, and then they can overwhelm the individual chunks, and the other chunks don't care because they're warring with each other. And so this is their only tool. They just have very many different flavors of it and know how to use it very effectively. So they're using divide and conquer when they investigate, analyze, stalk all of the politicians in your country and find out who the pedophiles are, and then supply them and then blackmail them. And then from that point on, they're using divide and conquer to use those people that have been captured to capture other people that are not necessarily pedophiles, but that can be captured at other levels by other means. And this is how they've been working their way through our institutions and through the Western world these last 40 or 60 years. Although, as I said in the video the other day, I think it goes way back to the original contact between the Dowager Empress and the British, okay? So back before the Tea Wars and the Opium Wars. Anyway, though, so the overwhoop float here, the overwoo subsuming will include more and more examples, more and more language showing up about the way in which the CCP is using the heads of our state against us and trying to divide the populace. And so we can expect our populace all around the planet, various populi, to react nationalistically and to harden their borders and this sort of thing. That comes later. That comes down into here, because we've got to get through this point right here to the point where the Wu is seen by the state, and we all see this very clearly. So you can go into the local coffee shop and say, damn, isn't it a bitch about being attacked by the CCP? And someone is going to not flip out or anything, right? They'll understand the reference and so on, at least to some extent. And that's where we're at here. Now, that doesn't do the head of our state any good, because they're in league with the CCP. They're captured, and they are bound, and they're not able to escape. So this is not, they're basically sort of willing hostages or willing captured. And so there's a very complicated period of time here. And I suspect that what we're going to see is a big burst, a big outflowing of Wu that will bring us up to the point where within that Wu will emerge the very first of these constitutional crises. This constitutional crisis will relate, of course, to the illegality of the Biden regime and the fact that the Chinese hacked the voting machines and all of this other, right? That the Chinese are actively attacking us electronically daily, through the MSN, mainstream media, and through the bioweapon. And then we'll find out that they've also attacked our crops. We're going to have big issues there, and it's going to get really tense for a while as we sort out all of this, because bear in mind, the CCP has agents within the state that are attempting to support the head of the state and will be trying to deny all of this and obfuscate it within the information war. But we're very, very, very close to the loss of the ability of the mainstream media and the head of the state and the CCP to continue to control the narrative. It's broken down to the point now where it's really fractured, and it's all barely hanging on as a bunch of independent icebergs. And we're going to see the river break like in Alaska or something, and all the ice is just going to be swept down. And then everything's going to, the Wu will be running free and flowing. And then at that point, as I say, we'll be into the constitutional crises here. How we'll resolve them, I don't know. I mean, we will resolve them. How rapidly and under what conditions, I'm not able to say it all. But we'll get to them before the first part of October. The biggest part of risk for everybody is going to be the month of September. Remember, September is National Preparedness Month, so you want to be prepared. You want to have food, water, be prepared to lose power, replace it if you can, or live without it if you can. So, the conditions are going to be weird. Some things we can do, some things that are going to make sense would be for the Chinese community, American Chinese, Chinese Americans, however we want to think of them. The Chinese community here in all of Asian community here in the United States to understand there's going to be a very nasty backlash to China. And as with all of these things, that backlash will slop over to local examples of the Chinese. Now, there's going to be efforts here later on to recover and understand how deep the infiltration is and how much the Chinese own. All of this is pertinent because of the, as it'll come out in the devolution, the ability to seize the assets of the infiltrating parties and then use them to repair the damage, right? That sort of thing. But the Asian community here needs to understand that we will have backlash. There are going to be stupid people that will try and take it out on any Chinese-looking face, any Chinese-looking face, and they may be really stupid. And so it would be my advice under the circumstances that the Asian community get ahead of this. And that is to say that the Asian community recognize that we're deep into this overwooing process of the mainstream narrative, and that they should recognize and deal as adults with the potential for a racially tinted backlash coming their way that they could forestall and deflect and meet head on by many means, right? So in other words, don't just simply be a victim of this, understand that it's going to happen, start alerting your communities to it, start openly talking about the potential for it, don't pile on the hate, just say that, look, we've got to be adults about this, Everybody's going to be really, really, really angry with the CCP. The CCP is going to be represented by Chinese faces. We look Chinese to these people. We need to be prepared for these people to be angry at us, but that anger will abate, as does all anger, and sense shall return. We need to just keep safe during this period of time, and we can keep safe by discussing exactly this with these people that might be attacking us, and also defend ourselves from the really stupid bastards to whom you may not speak just because they're too wrapped up in their own emotions. And so, internal self, protection societies, flying teams for crises, this sort of thing. Don't be a victim about it. You don't have to be aggressive, just be fierce about protecting your rights, like everybody. And so that would be in my opinion, a wise thing to start setting up now, because it will become necessary as more and more people, more and more normies, which will include more and more stupid people, become aware that China is at war with us, therefore we must be at war with them. Or the CCP is at war with us, therefore we must be at war with the CCP. And so, as I say, the Asian American community should start hardening itself up so that it doesn't have to take the blows. Because you can stand out there with a stick and tell somebody, I'm standing here with a stick, come on, right? But I'm not going to attack you, I'm just defending myself. And everybody understands that. So under the circumstances, prepare for the overwoo to strike the state as the head of the state, as the rest of the state just moves away from their narrative. And then without the narrative, what does the state have? If everybody accepts that Biden cheated, then he is not president, he's a cheater. And so then the next thing is that everybody is then going to see he's not been in the White House, that he's been doing all of this from the three-quarter perspective model that was created at the Tyler Perry studios in Atlanta. And then we're going to say, oh, okay, wait a second. What about all those bastards that pretended to be real journalists? They were there. They didn't tell us they weren't in the White House. They pretended to be in the White House. We got to have a few words with those fuckers. And then it goes on and on and on. So the woo is just going to, it'll just burst out like water through a dam once that dam has been breached. And we're in the breaching process where the woo is actually coming up through all these different cracks everywhere. And people are breaking down their own internal allegiance or hooks to the mainstream narrative because of the giant amounts of confirming other individuals who have stories that are in defiance of that narrative. So everybody you see that has a bad vaccine reaction or knows somebody who died from the vaccine and this kind of stuff, like myself. I know people have died from this shit. And I know people that even worse than that are now trapped in their own bodies because of neurological damage. So this is a foul, evil thing they're doing. And you have people like me saying this, and I say this to people on the street. I don't get so many weird looks anymore. I used to be hey, he's that wackadoodle, right? Not anymore. So we're at that point. And as the state separates from, as the body politic separates from the Kaputa and the Putas, we're going to find that things get real weird. All right, so the head of the state is going to react the way it is doing now, in the sense of trying to issue edicts and trying to get people to follow him, because that's all it's got. So understand the mechanism. The Biden people, whoever's controlling the strings, issues an edict saying, there's going to be mandatory vax requirements going state to state to state, interstate travel or whatever. And the rest of us just full of shit, we're not going to do that crap. And then what does that head of the state have left? What does it do? It can try to enforce if it has a sure and certain grasp of the security arm of the state, and we don't have that here. That is quite evident. And so all of these edicts that they're handing out are going to drop by the wayside, as you'll see. So we've lost the door-to-door campaign to get you, to listen to the vaccinistas, okay? And we've lost the big push for all of the military to get vaccinated. That's breaking up all over. And so all of these efforts are going to run into the fact that there is no longer a monocultural adherence to the state narrative. So it actually, to a certain extent, it was sort of a natural outgrowth. And if you look at the words, if you look at the language, so we're in a coup d'etat, and it's important that we understand that in French, that there's that S in there, and that really is the word state. And so we can actually read French if we understand how these letter transpositions are done. Same thing with like German and Swedish and even English, in German it's Tag, T-A-G for day, Guten Tag, good day, right? And we say good day, so we don't use the T word, we use a D. And we have that sort of ah sound, and we just put a Y on the end of it. And the Swedes use dog, and dog, and all these other Teutonic variations for basically tag or day. And so all of this stuff is related at that level, and we're going to see these relationships emerge within the populace as it's moving away from the state relative to the narrative because of the diversity. So the Chinese, the CCP, has weaponized racism and weaponized diversity through the heads of our state against the populace, trying to divide the populace along racial and diversity lines, because they're not able to divide us along class lines the way Mao did in China in order to achieve the CCP takeover. This is basically the same program that Mao used, or that they used in taking over all of China. It was more than just Mao. Okay, so the diversity being used against us is in fact the main weapon that's going to come back and defeat the whole process here, because that diversity of the population means that we are not all tied to the same level of that common narrative. It's not like a monoracial social order the way that the CCP is. So the CCP, basically, you got to be Han Chinese. There's other forms of Chinese, other phenotypical types of Chinese within the CCP, but they are not dominant at all. So in Hitler's Germany, there wasn't a whole lot of room for people that were not Aryan. And that's why it worked, was because they were able to, if you want to think about it a weird way, they were able to find all of the language, all of the imagery and all of the symbolism and all of the music and all of that to cause a particular vibration in all of these Aryan people that they would go along with Hitler and what he was saying, right? And Shaka Zulu, right? He did the same thing with all of the Zulu people. He united all of the tribes of the Zulu, all of the very diverse, separate, individuated political organizations that had been all throughout southern Africa. He united into the Zulu nation. And he did that the same way that Hitler did, or not Hitler, but that the National Socialist machine did to the Aryan people in Germany, and the same way that the Japanese did to the Japanese Emperor cult did to the Japanese people in the beginning of World War II. So all of these efforts are done basically, though, within a monoracial culture, and it's relatively easy that way. You can't do that shit here We got too many white guys that, you know, have been rubbing shoulders with black guys and Mexicans too long, and we're too goddamn diverse about all of this stuff that we're not buying into the narrative at that level, nor can we. So we're not going to have a fascist state like Germany. They sell that. The CCP tells the leftists that, and you got the, you know, all these gay guys that were shitting in their pants thinking that Trump was going to throw them into death camps. But it's not that way. We cannot have, in my opinion, we cannot have that mono-focused kind of a fascist state here in the United States, not with the cultural diversity that we have. They just don't go together. They never have and they never will. So we will evolve other things entirely, and you may have people explore fascism, but it's never going to be national fascism. We have fascism now under communism in the sense that we have that blending of the corporations and government to fuck over the people. And that's, you know, the real good definition of fascism. And it doesn't matter whether they call themselves, you know, National Socialists or the Fascisti or communists. They're all communists. Anyway, though, so getting back to the projection stuff, and then I got to get moving here. During this period of time, we can expect the crumbling of the state. We can expect the National Preparedness Month of September to live up to its name. If things are going to break down, they'll break down in that period of time. By October, we should have a fairly solidified overwooing, and that is to say that the ability of the CCP and the captured heads of state in the Western world to control the narrative will have failed, and we will see that their emotional line, their emotional tension line is splitting off, as I had said earlier, and that we would be getting into this desperation for, oh, there it is. Yeah. I was looking for a good example in a French word where we had a P with an S and an E. So anyway, though, we're going to get into the desperation language, and this is where these people will become dangerous, and they'll start doing things, and because they only have power, they only have, and they must exercise that power. They're not leaders. They are, in fact, followers. They keep following and following, following, and they're falling behind in their following to the point where we're not going to pay any attention to them anymore. And true leaders will emerge because we are, in fact, at war with the Chinese, not the Chinese, but the CCP. And it's going to have to be taken to some next level of that war. Now, that war could be kept at an information warfare level, I believe, for a many number of years, but the thing that will do that will be a fully adult conversation about what these people are doing and what the consequences of that are to ourselves and the social order. And that means that we've got to free ourselves from the mainstream media and the social engineering tech monsters that are in support of the CCP. Bear in mind, you know, all these fuckers work for these captured heads of state. And that head is about to separate from the body politic as the body politic goes diverse and just no longer pays attention to the thing that used to bind the head to the body, which was the nerves of the narrative. And so that's our coup d'etat. A strange kind of a language lesson. Be prepared for stuff to occur over this period of time. We don't know how the head of states, how they're going to react. We can see that they're getting lunatic in places like France and Australia, and we're going to see more other places. Some places like Switzerland, we're seeing the enforcement arms come to their senses and realize they are within the body politic. So the police are saying, no, we're not going to enforce this shit anymore. You're seeing that pop up all over. There will be a lot of fractionalizing of the, fracturing of the narrative, and individual local authorities will react differently than the monolithic heads of state would like, the elitists. But they're not done yet. There's some stuff they can do. It shouldn't be, I either too powerful or too long-lasting, because they are indeed getting very, very, very weak and getting weaker by the day. As I say, once the overwoo busts out into adult conversation, they've lost. We just merely have to live through it all and then go through all of the process of recovering from the damage and this sort of thing, which all of this will be very exciting to rebuild. And we should have the resources and so on now that the parasites will have been severed from our necks and sucking our blood. You know, it's been a rough couple of thousand years, guys. These fuckers have just been a real you know, parasite on our back kind of thing. So what can we do without them? Bear in mind that the power elite serve no function, and all they do is concentrate wealth. And they concentrate wealth and they take it from us. And I'm not advocating communism. I'm a meritocracy kind of guy. I'm a constitutional kind of guy. If you don't want to work, that's fine. We should be able to maybe provide you enough stuff so you don't starve and stink, you know, and drive us all crazy. But we're not, you know, we're not obligated to give you a nice, happy life, sort of thing, right? So you work and you earn and you get stuff from universe. So meritocracy. But you should get what you work for, and your work should be humanly compensated, and it should not be structured on a financial pyramid whose whole point is to concentrate wealth away from the people that produce it. And so in that sense, I might be seeming to argue towards proletariat owning the means of production like Karl Marx, but I'm not. What I'm arguing for is the availability of capital to people to go on out and give them the ability to fail, making businesses, creating factories, all of that kind of stuff. I think we should have a legitimate kind of a stock market. I think our original or our designs in the 1800s for how capitalism should work with a meritocracy on a gold-based sound money system will return. It's going to be a number of years before we get there, but this will be a much happier life for millions of people once we get off of this fiat debt slavery where we are slaves to the power elite and all they do is concentrate from the bazillions of us. And there we go, guys. We're at that point now. The overwoo is overtaking all of us, and it shall overtake the remnants of the power elite here across all of the nations, and it should fall fairly fast. I'm still of the opinion that they will be taken down, it will be elsewhere first. So it'll be Macron, or maybe it'll be Australia. Those two places are pushing so hard that the populace is going to, they're ratcheting up the intensity by a pressure cooker kind of an approach. They can because the populations are not armed, but that only goes so far. And then it's at some point a rock is a weapon. And if you get enough people with rocks, your local army won't do shit. And I can assure you of that. Anyway, though, so I'm not advocating violence, and we should not go that route. They expect it, they want to get it started. They want to cause a division between the police and the populace, between the military and the populace, so they can exploit that division. Remember, they only have one thing, and that is divide and conquer. Everything else is built on that. So if someone's in there saying, you know, he's the bad guy and you should do something, then look at the fucker that's saying that to make sure you want to listen to him. Anyway, that's all. I got to get moving. We got to get some stuff done. I got to get more preps ready because these guys are insane and unhinged and about to get more of both. Live long and prosper, and be very aware of what's going on.